The bell tolls. The midnight hour is upon us. It's time once again for two internet strangers to discuss the good and evil of the horror genre. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the terror within the Hallow-Holics Anonymous podcast.
Oh, hi. You look like you would enjoy some candy, yes?
I do like candy.
Just take my hand then, little boy, and I'll take you somewhere very nice.
Can we get balloons?
Corey, what are you doing?
Nothing.
Oh, look, a distraction. I'd better leave now.
I'm not going to ask why you're dressed like a small child, Corey. We just need to start the podcast. Hi, I'm Maddy.
And I'm Corey. And this is Hallow-Holics Anonymous, a show about all things horror and occasionally Halloween.
On this day in horror history.
Witchboard 2, Stigmata, Stir of Echoes, and Malevolence were released.
That was on this day in horror history.
Yeah, it doesn't look like anybody died. I'm a little disappointed.
That's unfortunate. That was all you had, right?
That was all I had.
Okay, good.
With that being said, I guess it's time to talk about our movies, The Intellectual and The Incomprehensible. Corey, what does that mean?
I don't know. I guess intellectual means kind of really boring until the last 8 minutes. I had a little bit of a problem with your movie, but we'll get to that. And Incomprehensible definitely describes my movie. Incomprehensible is just whether it's a nonsensical plot, hard to follow storyline, ridiculous characters making very little sense, all of the above. That happens a lot in B-horror.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna go ahead and say that if it's a 1970s movie, it gets a pass. Because that's kind of an essential element of a lot of 1970s films. No matter the genre. But yes, this week we both picked some very oddly contrasting films. Mainly because my film, by Fritz Lang, M, we couldn't think of anything else that would pair well with it.
I think that Deathbed pairs with everything.
Exactly. We went in the exact opposite direction here.
Yes.
It's sort of like taking your uppers and downers to even you out. Mine's a downer, yours is an upper.
Also, the way uppers and downers work is if you take strong enough ones, they make you hallucinate and go slightly mad, which is also what occurred while watching both of these movies for very different reasons for me.
Consecutively.
Yeah.
With that being said, I think we need to play some sort of game to lighten the mood before the episodes start. Well, before we start talking about the movies, the main meat.
Yeah, for sure, dude, because your movie's a downer.
Oh, it's not that much of a downer. Yeah, okay, it's a downer. I'm going to pick a short horror video, or a horror trailer, if you will, for you and the audience to enjoy.
Okay.
In fact, I spent a lot of time thinking about exactly what movie I would pick for this.
I'm sure you've been up nights.
Yeah, okay, this one works. We're going to do some quick commentary on this intellectual masterpiece, an essential element of any horror collector's oeuvre, if you will. I'm going to ask you to list the title for our listeners.
So this one is called Tarantula.
From?
Nestor Paiva.
Otherwise known as 1955.
Oh, wait, does Nestor Paiva mean 1955?
No, you just said the wrong thing.
Oh. I am.
towering fury no one can escape.
That tarantula actually looked really good. I mean, it was shadow.
It looked like a real tarantula. Science fiction's most terrifying thrill.
But what if circumstances were to magnify one of them in size and strength, took it out of its primitive world and turned it loose in ours?
Dude, that guy's not talking about a tarantula.
More cruel and deadly than anything that ever walked the earth.
Even science was stunned.
Neither's the doctor.
Should have been mankind's greatest boon.
50-foot woman.
With such power to cause phenomenal growth, prove dangerously unstable, man was confronted with his most shocking blunder.
Look at that guy. Is that his face?
It's like, what is that?
It's like somebody melted Boris Karloff.
A 100-foot spider that was now ravaging the panic-stricken countryside.
Okay, I'm gonna have to correct him right here. A tarantula is not a spider. Is it? Bullets can't stop it.
Steady.
The police department can't stop.
Dynamite can't kill it.
They just didn't have enough.
It's like the whole flashback.
Man, Universal really put out some crap.
Okay, one more trailer and then we'll get to the movies.
All right.
Okay, let's go into the 1970s to see what cinema really had developed and intellectual stuff happened.
My guess would be funk music mostly.
Yeah, I'm not really good at this.
This one's called... I don't know when to stop.
Once this motion picture sinks its fangs into you, you'll never be the same.
I wonder if this guy's still alive.
Don't say it. Hiss it.
Dude, that was the happiest dude in the shower ever until that snake happened.
Hiss it.
Man, these
Don't say
snakes
it.
sound
Hiss
weird.
it.
Yeah. They sound like locusts.
You know, I found the most unbelievable part of this wasn't the man being turned into a snake, but that he would actually sleep with a woman.
Parker, what is this? I feel like my guts are being rearranged.
Touch your skin. It's scaled. Look for your legs. They're gone. Feel your body. It's cold. And listen.
Is he talking to me?
for the hissing.
Oh, no, they're still there.
I love you.
Your face.
What about it?
It looks different.
Oh,
Doesn't
oh.
want to see you.
That was gross.
For me, I know.
There's some homoerotic undertones here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can't have a movie with snakes and not have some homoerotic undertones.
King Cobra versus
Get it, Mongoose, get it.
Or is it man versus man?
This movie actually has the world records for the amount of times David is said in a film.
I'm pretty sure Lost Boys probably has it beat, but...
Oh, that's true.
But, like, that commercial just showed you basically the last shot of the movie.
Of course it did.
Anyway, now that we've journeyed through some of the greatest films known to man, let's go a little bit earlier, back to Fritz Lang's classic M from 1931.
There are a lot of orphans in the 30s. Do you think if we compared, like, statistically the amount of orphans that exist today to the amount of orphans that existed in the 30s,
Where did
do you
that come
think it would
from?
be similar? Well, the first house we see when all the kids are dancing, singing that kid murder song, that's an orphanage, right? That woman doesn't have 30 kids.
No, it's an apartment building.
No, those are orphans.
No, like, the main character is waiting for her daughter to come home.
Her orphan daughter. I got nothing. All right. All right, but my question stands. There are a lot of orphans in old movies, and I don't think and I guess it makes sense. Medicine wasn't quite as advanced as it is now. So moms died, dads died, there were war wars.
Lots of people died. We'll leave it.
Yeah, so there are probably a lot more orphans then than there were today, but I'm gonna find out the truth.
Don't worry, we're making up for it now with all the opioids.
Oh, seriously? Yeah. That got dark.
Don't worry, this lighthearted romp will...
This lighthearted rump. Tell me more of this lighthearted rump.
One might say this was loosely inspired by the gruesome murders of Peter Curtin, the Dusseldorf vampire of 1929, but in an interview with Fritz Lang, the director himself described the conception of M as a conversation with his wife and co-writer at the time, wherein they thought of serial killers writing letters and conceived of the worst sort of killer they could, a child murderer. Thus we have M, Peter Lorre's screen debut in which a city is driven mad with suspicion and anger as they try to track him down and prevent any more murders. The police and the criminals of Berlin are in parallel as their own methods lead them closer and closer, guided ultimately by a blind balloon salesman and an eerie whistle.
This movie's a lot like Reddit when a national tragedy occurs. Like, it sort of follows the same beats. You've got the tragedy occurring, and then you have panicked posting.
You have witch hunts.
Then you have witch hunts. You have an entire section of pointless accusation, pointing out the wrong guy. You have arresting the wrong guy. And then you have more mob rule. And then finally you have the cops dealing with it properly.
Well, if you think about it, Reddit is kind of a digital testing ground for human psychology.
Well, that's a good point.
Fritz Lang, as a director, was considered very demanding. He's actually the sort of stereotypical role model of demanding directors. Just picture a man with a monocle, some riding pants, and for some odd reason, a whip, and you've got yourself a riding crop, and you've got Fritz Lang.
How did you know what I was wearing?
Well, I knew you had to change out of that dress into something.
Yeah, well, this is what I sleep in.
Watching an interview with Harold Nebenzahl, who is the son of the producer Seymour Nebenzahl, I thought it was really interesting how he stated that Lang didn't like the looks of an ashtray in one of their scenes. A scene set in a brothel and gambling den. So he completely stopped production so he could go to that ashtray, stub out a few extra cigars, and make a pile of ashes to make it look just dirty enough before he would start the production again.
Ugh.
He was all about very minute details in his filming.
I know I shouldn't hate that, but I hate that. Like, attention to detail is important, I get it, but some pretentious director just walking up to an ashtray, stopping the set, obviously being angry and condescending to all of his actors, probably especially the women because it's the 30s, pushing people out of his way, dropping his monocle, muttering to himself, picking it up, going over to that ashtray and stuffing out more cigars and then going back behind his damn camera to tell people what to do like a megalomaniacal jerk drives me a little bit crazy.
But Corey...
Nobody saw that ashtray. Except like one pretentious 22-year-old film student at Berkeley.
Who wrote his dissertation on it.
That's exactly what I was going to say next. He wrote his dissertation on that stupid ashtray.
But Corey, I have one thing to completely, just diffuse your anger here.
Okay. If you say child murder, I'm going to be very disappointed in your opinion of me.
No. Fritz Lang was German.
That doesn't make it right. The Germans have done a lot of things.
But they're very precise about it.
Oh, okay. I don't like where this is going, but you're right. Germans are precise.
Well, in his defense, his mother, though she converted to Catholicism and was raised Catholic, and he was raised Catholic, his grandparents were Jewish. So technically, legally, he would have been considered Jewish. So he wasn't a Nazi stereotype. He was just a methodical German stereotype. Now, during the conception of the script, Lang and his wife at the time, Thea von Harbo, did speak with several killers for research purposes, including the aforementioned Peter Curtin. So they, they did a pretty heavy study on kind of trying to understand what made killers tick or how they behaved as people.
I suppose I shouldn't complain about the little details if they're going that deep into it, because that can be considered one of those details that they could have overlooked and just made up. So that's pretty cool.
And it was 1931. Film was in its infancy. And not only that, but this was a talking picture when they were just starting to roll out. It was basically like 20 years of knowledge had to be thrown out into the trash as people relearned how to make cinema, because all of the rules that applied for emotional and physical staging had completely changed.
Yeah. And I don't know, I get that, but this is another problem I had with this movie, and I can't blame it because it is one of the earliest talking pictures. There's a subtlety in film that you don't see in stage acting, and this is still stage acting. What all these actors in this movie are doing is very much stage acting. Mm-hmm. Right? They're just over dramatic, they're pushing it, the comedy is just over the top when it's even there. I mean, obviously it's a pretty dark film, but it still has its moments.
Oh yeah, it does.
But yeah, that all just bothers me, and the pacing, because of all this stuff, because it's new, bothered me as well. It's just a very slow movie. Even the chase scene is very slow.
Now, I don't completely disagree with you there. I do feel the pacing was drawn out. But, I mean, appreciating Fritz Lang's style, and also this was over the top because it was a transitional film between expressionism and film noir. It was a cusp film. It was in between. So, of course, it was going to still have that over-the-top expressionism style acting. And Peter Lorre himself, this was his on-screen debut. At the time, he was an improvisational stage actor. He was actually doing nightly performances of Brecht's Man is Man while working on his film shoots during the day. And yet he was the most believable actor in the entire film.
Oh, he was phenomenal. The scene where he's hidden in that little storage room about to get caught, like the look on his face and those creepy bug eyes that dude has. Oh, you could just feel the fear. He was so good. I will give him that. He was awesome. And I will also give this movie, like, without this movie, nothing exists after it. There is no film noir. There, like, some of the shots in this, the shadow play, stuff like that is absolutely great. But it's just, as with most of the really influential movies, I can't stand the majority of them.
I can understand that completely. Again, you know, it took me a while to even be able to enjoy Italian movies, which you gotta admit are even more drawn out than this one.
Yeah, no doubt. I had to grow into Italian movies too. Like, I couldn't get into those until, like, my brain had slowed down a little bit in my I think early 20s, I think. Yeah. I couldn't watch anything by Fulci in high school. Peter Jackson bored me in high school. Like, I couldn't do Dead Alive in high school.
Oh man, I was doing Dead Alive when I was 9, but
yeah, no.
Women mature faster than men, so I mean, it's
The turning point was probably my junior or senior year when I started to slow down a little bit when I watched Cemetery Man.
Yeah, that's a good movie.
Yeah, Cemetery Man is what got me into the Italians. That's what, like, I went from that movie to Suspiria and then slowly got through the Italian catalog.
I have the Criterion version I ordered specifically to watch this film because I wanted to see if there was a lot of material available on it that would be a better source than just looking at blogs and databases online. There's actually several versions of him on the DVD, including the French version, which was reshot not long after this one. Then it had a lot of sequences from this film spliced in with re-recordings in French, including Peter Lorre's performance, while everything else was dubbed in French. And what was really weird is that it was, like, over-edited. They cut a lot of stuff down to the point that even Peter Lorre's final monologue wasn't even as powerful. Because it was all done in pretty much one take in the original, and the energy really built. Yeah. It was intense. You watched him break on camera.
Yeah, that was really great. And surprisingly progressive-minded of that lawyer when he starts speaking up about, like, all right, this guy's sick. If he's sick, he can't help it. If he can't help it, you guys can't pull this mob justice stuff. Mm-hmm. And I love that when he points to the mob guy, he's like, you, right now, you're wanted on 3 murders, dude. And you're telling this guy...
Exactly, yeah. And yeah. I was astonished that he really was serving as an actual defense lawyer, not just letting it go, you know? There's one last thing that the French film did that I kind of think, in the lens of what the movie was supposed to mean, was a bit of a crime. In that, in the ending of the film, I'm sorry, listeners, to betray this, but I've got to tell you this. So, press pause now. As we usually say, go and watch the movie before you continue, if you don't want spoilers. There's a sequence at the very end of the movie. You see the mourning parents, the mothers, weeping and saying, well, it's still not going to bring them back, and this could happen to you tomorrow. And the French version cut that ending and then just added a sequence of children laughing and playing because all was right with the world again.
Ugh.
Completely, just entirely destroying the final message of the movie, which was supposed to be that there is no true retribution that can bring back a murdered child.
I mean, not to mention the fact that this movie kind of predicted the world going downhill. Like, serial murder only got worse.
I do think it's interesting that they did study the pathology of serial killers and pedophiles with this film in a way that has, at the time, just hadn't been done.
Mm-hmm.
No one really thought about the mind of a killer. They just thought of them explicitly as evil people who had to be taken care of and removed from society.
Yeah, I mean, M thinks of himself as he doesn't think of himself as sick. He says there's an evil inside him. He doesn't say there's a sickness inside of him. I think the defense attorney is the one that says that.
Mm-hmm. Now, what I will say about the beginning of the movie, when you see these German children singing their nursery rhyme, is apparently, I guess, German kids don't like to use metaphors. There's no cute little pocket full of posies. No, there's just, your head is going to be cut off and you are it. And that was just very gruesome.
Yeah, I dug it.
There were several reels in this film, which I'm sure you noticed, that were completely silent, without even Foley audio of like cars moving or crowds. That wasn't an accident. That was on purpose. Oh
yeah, I thought. See, that didn't work for me because I did until just now. I thought I was watching a bad dub of the film.
Mm-hmm. So that was actually done to make the music or the action coming in that much sharper. Again, it was an experiment. It was all an experiment. This was Fritz Lang's first talking picture. He was playing around with this new technology. And it may not have worked entirely, but I admire that he tried.
I mean, I will say I was glad that I sat through the first hour and 40 minutes to get to the last 8. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying I didn't hate all of it in there. I'm making fun of the chase scene, and it was very slow, but it was well done. And I liked how they added that burglar character in there to sort of lighten everything up occasionally.
I did like his character.
Yeah, I thought he was pretty cool.
He was just, for the most part, like, pissed off to be there, didn't really want to do anything anybody was telling him, just going along with it.
Yeah. I do think that they could have cut, like a half hour out of that movie and still had something that worked really well. There was just so much that happened that just kind of stopped happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you mean there, but I think those moments were meant to draw out the tension.
I guess. They ended up drawing out the movie for me, but I can understand. I mean, I know what he was going for, and I know it was an experiment. So, I mean, I can forgive a lot, especially considering how important this movie is to the last 80 years of filmmaking.
Exactly. Yeah, and one thing that really stood out to me, just a really minor thing, is that after the police, they were basically spreading across the city trying to find any leads whatsoever, like attacking crime on a level they probably never had before. When they crashed this brothel and started just arresting people like crazy, there's this moment at the end where you see the camera going across the table of all of these valuables meticulously laid out. From cigarettes to watches to watch chains to jewelry to these mink fox stoles. And it was all stacked up in a way that even though I know this was prior to the Holocaust, it was disturbing how much it made me think of that.
Yeah, I got that too. I also thought how interesting it was how they the weapons were just piled and like thrown about. Mm-hmm. There's a chaos to the weaponry, and then you go over and then you start to get into the jewelry and the expensive clothes, and they're all laid out neatly. So it kind of goes from this like these weapons of chaos in a chaotic order to this sort of
you're just taking their stuff.
Yeah, but even more so, like, I just felt like that table was a metaphor. You've got weapons of chaos chaotically piled, drawing into this civilized pile, not even a pile, this very well-ordered part of civilization. You know what I mean? Like, I thought that must have been on purpose as well.
I also found it very striking when you saw the conversations with the cops at the table and you saw the conversations with criminals at the table. And as their discussions went on further, it was spliced closer and closer together that it almost seemed like they were talking to each other.
I didn't catch that because those scenes I kept losing focus during those scenes. I definitely was more into I didn't actually realize that those guys were criminals. At first, I thought it was kind of the local union, and it was like a working class thing. It took me a while to understand what I was seeing.
And there was one local union they worked with, the Beggars Guild, which I just loved that. I
thought that was super cool, yeah.
Yeah. I loved that the criminals were able to unite this Beggars Guild and to have them casing, essentially, the whole city to track down this killer. And I loved that chalk M they used as his sort of scarlet letter, if you will, on his back to pinpoint who he was.
Yeah, and that was a really great way that beggar marked him, too. Just scrawled it on his hand and then went over there and slapped it on his back. And then the kid he was about to murder was like, "Uncle, let me help you wipe that off." Oh,
yeah, she was such a sweetheart.
That creeped me out.
Now, I do feel like the police side of things, their early forensics were a bit broad. I mean, he smokes these popular cigarettes. He writes things on his windowsill, and he also uses red pencils. We've got him. This guy has got to be the killer. No one else in the city of 4.5 million people would have all of those factors combined.
Not at all. I mean, they did look at one table before they started looking at windowsills, so they were open to something.
They were definitely convinced this guy was the killer since they went back.
Right.
But this movie ultimately really isn't about the murders. It's about the paranoia and the hunt. We, as the audience, already know who the killer is. We don't even see the murders. Lang, in an interview, expressed that he was not aiming for Laurie to be sympathetic. In the interview I watched, he almost seemed frustrated with the question and unable to fully answer it until he'd been asked 2 or 3 times.
Oh, wow.
And as far as violence goes, because you don't really see much violence in this except when he's thrown a few times against the wall and dragged down the stairs, but Lang expressed that he was not aiming, he hated showing violence, especially with children. He felt it would be tasteless. He actually described audience as collaborators, and their imaginations were far more effective tools than showing what the killer did to the children. And I agree with that.
I do too. I think normally cutting away, it depends on the movie. It depends on the type of movie. But considering this is sort of a precursor to modern thriller, and those tend to be pretty blatant in everything they show, the murders, the sexuality, like all that stuff, I do prefer movies like that. Like, we never see the detective's wife's head in the box in Seven. That kind of stuff. I mean, it's a bad example because Seven's a pretty graphic movie, but that scene is so powerful because you don't actually see the gore. You see Brad Pitt's reaction to seeing his wife or girlfriend or whatever's head in the box. And like I said earlier, that kind of stuff doesn't happen without this movie paving the way for it, One
final note on Lang's interview, in that if you look at a movie like Metropolis and you wonder how he came down to a story like this, he actually expressed that he was exhausted with big films, and he wanted to do a smaller, more intimate story. This was, of any movie Fritz Lang ever did, his personal favorite.
So if that's Lang's favorite personal film, he's got some bad taste in film.
What?
I don't really believe that. I'm sorry. I didn't like the movie, but I did like parts of it, and I understand the importance of it. All right, so I have one more note on this movie. Well, it's not really a note on the movie. It's a note on the Zodiac Killer. Hear me out. So there's a theory that the Zodiac Killer wasn't as smart as he wanted everybody to think he was, that his ciphers were just kind of nonsense. The ones they never figured out, they weren't figured out because he didn't actually put any there. He just wanted people to think he was smart. And the letter that M writes to the cops, that reminded me a lot of the Zodiac letter, and I wish we had the two to compare right now. Instead of looking it up, I thought that maybe we could ask our listeners to tweet at Ted Cruz to see if any of that is true.
At Ted Cruz? Oh, God.
Yeah, the Zodiac Killer.
That is the worst setup.
I didn't say it was going to be a good joke. I said there would be jokes.
Go to the corner now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This movie did make me want to rewatch Casablanca.
Me too.
What?
Because I was thinking, when I was super bored watching this movie, I'm like, man, I could be watching Casablanca where they've actually perfected all this shit. But again, very important movie. enjoyed about 25 minutes out of the hour and 48 minutes I watched.
But you loved his final monologue, right?
Yeah, that was the last 8 minutes of the movie, counting the women at the end. That whole end thing takes place in like 10 minutes. A great 10 minutes, though.
Okay, then, as long as we can agree on that.
Oh, for sure. Like, I know that, like, excuse me. I know that I got, like, a half hour into it twice, and that's when I messaged you and was like, oh, I can't do it. This movie, this has to get better by the end, right? You're like, yeah, just stick it out. It'll get better at the end. Wait for Peter Lorre's monologue. And you were so right. It was amazing. It was powerful. It affected me. Like, it made the rest of the movie worth it. So I'm very glad I watched it. I'll never watch it again.
Oh, last few notes. Obviously, the balloon bit is awesome, and so is the bit where you see his shadow.
Oh, the balloon bit. Yeah, that was so good. Mm-hmm. Where it just floats up and gets stuck in the power line. Mm-hmm. Oh, that was actually a super beautiful scene. It made me feel stupid thinking that was beautiful. I felt like that kid with the bag in American Beauty.
No, that's an iconic moment, and it tells you exactly what happened.
Yeah, oh, that was perfect. It was so good.
Moving on to an even greater cinematic accomplishment. One of the greatest masterpieces, if you will, the world has ever seen.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to tell you a story. A story about a demon that lives in a tree. One day, this demon meets a human lady and decides he would like to be with her. So he turns himself into a breeze that somehow manages to seduce her. Then he takes the form of a man and creates a bed for them to have sex in. This demonic fella goes so hard that he kills this lady. Sort of. Apparently she's in some sort of half-death, but nonetheless, the demon tree guy thinks that he killed her. He's very sad about this. So sad that he cries tears of blood that land on the bed, which transform it into some kind of evil demon spawn bed that likes to eat folks. And that is about as logical as this movie's going to get. Like that backstory. This is the creation. As the tale of the demon tree guy ends, the tale of the deathbed, the bed that eats, begins.
Well, with a title like that is already far more logical than you would have expected.
That's true. Apparently Patton Oswalt did a bit about it and he got it wrong. He called it Deathbed, the bed that eats people.
Oh yeah, and he did this whole like joke about a rape stove and it wasn't that great of an act. I love you, Patton, but that wasn't your best act.
I didn't listen to it. I didn't want to color my part with stuff that Patton Oswalt put in my head, so I haven't watched it yet. I was planning on watching it later tonight. So we watch a lot of weird movies, but this is a really, really weird movie. It doesn't really have, aside from the backstory that I just told you, and I'm not going to tell you much about this movie because that's not the interesting thing to me. The interesting thing to me in this movie is a bit character, but I'll get to that in a minute. Mm-hmm. This movie doesn't really, it's got a basic structure, but it doesn't really have any main characters. Everybody in this movie sort of gets a chance to be their own main character, mm-hmm. and they all kind of narrate their own bits. In fact, there's so much narration that nobody really talks to each other. I think that everybody narrating their lives in this movie outnumbers the amount of times they talk to each other in this movie.
Yeah. And I've made it clear before how much I hate narration, but oddly enough, I actually think that works for this movie.
I do too. I think it adds to this weird sort of ethereal quality this movie has. This movie's almost a meditation to me. Mm-hmm. So every time you think you know what's going on in this movie and you feel like you have some sort of grasp on its plot, the rug is torn out from under you and you're back feeling confused yet entertained. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I'm not going to ruin this movie. Everybody should see it at least once, though once will be enough. You'll never get the feeling of seeing this movie for the first time again, and that is truly unfortunate.
When I was about 13 or 14, so around 2003, when this movie was actually finally released on DVD, thanks to Full Moon.
Yep, 2003.
It had been well known that there were only bootleg VHS copies floating around for decades about it. So at the time I had found a lot of stuff about it, and most of that stuff isn't online anymore, but there was actually a pretty cool niche community that was unbelievably excited about this movie being released on DVD.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, it's the sort of movie that reminds me of the tragedy of IMDb removing their forums, because there were some fantastic discussions about this film on it.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah, whenever a movie confuses me, I used to go to IMDb to read the chat, and I'd be like, oh, that makes sense now.
Yeah. Now you just have to post questions to Reddit and hope people are nice to you.
Yeah, they'll usually make really bad jokes or make up a fact, and then at the end be like, gotcha! Or say, and then I was thrown into Hell in a Cell, or
that wrestling thing, yeah. Instead of I did talk about the movie. I've told you guys enough about the movie. Just go see this movie. It's so strange, so wonderful. But yeah, I'd like to discuss the production very briefly, kind of touch upon a little bit of what you just said. The most interesting thing about this movie is basically this extra, this guy that just kind of has this throwaway scene in a flashback, but we'll get to that in a minute. So Deathbed was filmed in 1972, and a print was struck in 1977, but the movie itself wasn't released in 2003. Apparently nobody even knew who made it, because this work print didn't have any credits attached to it. George Barry, the actual director, discovered people on these forums you were talking about discussing his movie. He's like, oh, there might be something here. Maybe I could release it on DVD. And he did. The crazy thing is, because he couldn't release this in 77, he gave up on filmmaking. This is the dude's only IMDb credit. That really, really makes me upset, because there is so much potential in this little weird film. I think this guy could have been up there with Argento. I don't want to put him with Fulci. That's too blatant. Sauvé, Bava, stuff like that. Like, I think this guy could have reached that level of weirdness had he kept making films. But his spirit was crushed, and this is all he's got.
I don't think his spirit was crushed. I just think you work on a movie for 5 years, it takes you that long, you probably lose your passion for it.
Yeah, true. I mean, technically you worked on that movie, he stopped working on it in 77 and then came back to it in 2003. I'd like to see that dude. I wish that the momentum of this getting released in 2003 would have allowed him to make another film, but it doesn't seem like that's going to happen, so. Meh.
When I was trying to look up other opinions of this today to just add to my notes, I found that one reviewer on Something Awful gave this scathing review describing it as a pretentious post-wave art piece when they'd expected a funny movie with an evil bed moving around and stalking teenagers. First, this was made in the 70s, the early 70s, so it was entirely appropriate in theme. And second, as much as it pains me to sound like a pretentious jerk, they just didn't get it.
No, not at all. It's incredibly tongue-in-cheek.
Yes, exactly.
There's even weird stuff hidden in this movie that doesn't even need to be hidden in this movie. Mm-hmm. The main narrator, the artist, who was played by Dave Marsh, some guy I've never heard of, I don't know, actually is probably playing the artist Aubrey Beardsley.
Mm-hmm. Because they do a lot of splices to his art.
Yeah, they do a lot of splices to his art, and that's what I noticed. I'm like, wait, that art looks really familiar. And it took me a while to figure it out, but I did. And they died the same way. They both died of tuberculosis, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm. At the age of 25.
Yeah, that's not even mentioned. They just throw that away, and that's so cool that it was this semi-obscure artist from the 1800s.
Now,
late 1800s.
Yeah. Honestly, if I were the deathbed, after hearing all of the Aubrey's monologues, he is such a catty bitch. I would not have picked him as my companion. And is he supposed to be the deathbed's sugar dad? Is the deathbed his sugar daddy? Because he keeps giving him all these gifts.
Well, it looks like, because he finally got his cigarettes from the one girl. He gets all those rings. Mm-hmm. And I really liked that too. I liked how they told all the backstories through the rings and the items that guy had. I thought that was really neat.
And the bed basically told him his life story. Maybe they're a couple. And it's not that the artist wants to escape the painting, as he wants to escape his relationship.
Could be. I mean, at that point, I would. It's pretty toxic.
Certainly codependent, if anything.
Yeah. So the only actor I recognized in this is a young William Russ, who was, of course, the dad in Boy Meets World, among many other character roles. He was in American History X.
I think he's the only actor in this film who went on to continue doing film.
No, Damien Hall did too. She was in an episode of Grimm, I think, some other stuff. Yeah, I didn't go too far down the rabbit hole here because when I was researching this movie, William Russ was in Grimm too. But yeah, so he's in it. He's really the only recognizable dude, and he's very 70s in it. I love it. I think he's got a great look. Mm-hmm. But like I said, as I was researching this movie, the dude I really want to talk about is Jock Brandis, the priest that's seen reading in bed before he's eaten. Dude, this guy, did you read about him?
I haven't, but his sequence was so great.
Oh, just, you've heard nothing yet. Like, this guy only has 2 other small roles. He's in Scanners, and he's in Maximum Overdrive. Those are his only 2 acting credits. Most of his work is as a gaffer and occasionally an electrician or like a lighting guy. But this dude's life, he has done so much more. He spent time in Mali working on a water treatment plant for poverty-stricken like villages and stuff. And he noticed these women shelling peanuts all day long until their hands bled. So he ended up inventing this crazy peanut sheller that would like save these women all this trouble because they were also planting cotton. And they knew that if you plant peanuts after the cotton, it'll revitalize the soil. So they had to like sunbake these peanuts, which makes them harder than roasting them, and it's really hard on their fingers. It was just really interesting to me that he did this, so I started digging a little bit deeper, and I found a YouTube interview. So this dude also was in the Canadian version of the Peace Corps, and somehow got involved in flying food and supplies into the Republic of Biafra during the Nigerian Civil War. Like, dude was flying food and supplies in, getting, like, shot at, and bombs are blowing up left and right. He has to land his plane on a 3-lane highway during all this stuff. Like, he even rescued babies. Like, women would bring him their babies to take to safety.
Oh, my God.
And it gets crazier. During all this, he runs into Kurt Vonnegut just randomly as this air pirate of Biafra.
Oh, my God. Someone needs to make a movie about this guy.
I know. Kurt Vonnegut ends up hitching a ride with him on the plane. During this flight, they talk about how someone should write a book about all this craziness. It was decided between the 2 of them that whoever wrote it first and sent it to the other would win publishing rights. Brandis won. So there's a book. The book is called The Ship's Cat. So he actually wrote a book that Kurt Vonnegut was going to write before Kurt Vonnegut wrote it. And had it published. It's out there. You can read it. I think he said something about it being free online, too, so you might just be able to find it. Wow. And this is only like a tiny piece of what this badass humanitarian has done throughout his life, which just goes to show that we need to pay attention to these lesser-known extras and set workers. Their lives are probably way more interesting than we might think.
Now, I will say that Gary did have to stop the set because the foam didn't look right, so he had to just stack it up and rearrange it. And...
Wait, what?
No, I'm just referencing Fritz Lang.
Oh, yeah. George's attention to detail was astounding. It actually was a really good-looking bed, though. I'd sleep in that.
Mm-hmm, very comfy. I can understand why so many people died, including the orgy fest.
Oh, for sure. So, yeah, guys, watch this movie. It's real weird. Mm-hmm. That's about all I can say about it. It's totally worth it.
And again, it's astoundingly beautiful in some points. Even though it does drag out a bit sometimes, it works.
It does. But I can deal with that because you never know what's going to happen.
Pretty
next.
much, yeah. It seems like a movie that they must have enjoyed working on.
Oh, I don't see how they wouldn't have. It seems so much fun.
But I guess I just want to say that about all the movies we talk about.
Apparently most of this movie was filmed in one place at some mansion. I forget what it was called. So I don't know if they stayed on site. Sometimes in these B movies, they just rented the place out and stayed there. That would have been cool. Like they did that with Night of the Demons. Everybody stayed in the house while they were filming. So
guys, October is coming up pretty soon by the time this episode will be out. And we have a pretty big announcement. First of all, we're not doing the Dungeons and Dragons style game we planned on, but...
Yeah, nerds are busy people. Who would have thought it?
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to be on our podcast?
So, yeah, what we're going to do is a ridiculous Halloween retrospective. We're not going to do the Rob Zombie ones. Because the new Halloween is coming out, we are going to revisit every Halloween from the first one to, what did we decide? It was the 8th one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so 2 movies a week, all through Halloween, every Halloween movie, including a probably spoiler-free, definitely spoiler-free, we don't want to ruin it for you guys, review of the new movie in one of those, depending on when we both see it and when that episode falls.
So this will probably be one of the most comprehensive Halloween retrospectives you've ever heard in a podcast, because we're spacing it out so much.
Yes. And hopefully incredibly ridiculous as well, because we are getting into some awful films.
And we're actually going to be having a party with almost all of the guests we've had.
Oh, yeah. Satan's going to be back.
Jim?
The Gremlins.
The Gremlins, yes.
Who's Jim?
Oh, remember that guy who likes you a lot. Who shows up in zany escapades to pretend to be different people.
Wasn't that the dude that was just talking in the German accent at the beginning of this whole thing?
Was it?
I think so.
Well, I see you think that I am this Jim. Thy name is Gustav von Splockenbiel.
That's an interesting name.
It is a family name. My father was also named Gustav von Splockenbiel.
Dude, just admit it. It's you. I'm so tired of you. Why are you? You're outside my window right now, aren't you?
Never. I would never spy on someone like that. But you do look lovely tonight in your... I noticed you've shaved a little bit.
Oh my God, just get rid of him, Maddie.
Well, before I do that, we've got to close out the episode. Priorities, after all.
Yes, let me help.
Oh, he's gross.
Sure, go ahead. Tell them about our blog.
No, I don't want this guy reading this stuff, Maddie. It's too creepy. It's made me very uncomfortable.
Okay, fine.
Because I know he's outside right now.
Well, be sure to come to our party next week. Gustav von Blockenstiel.
I will see you there. Don't you worry about that. Just make sure Corey attends in some lovely attire.
Oh, God, this is terrifying.
You know, I strongly suspect he's Transylvanian, not German.
He's probably just a dude doing a terrible accent. Would be my guess. He's just a really bad actor.
Well, if you want to check our blog out, it's Hallow-Holic.blogspot.com or Hallow-Holic.wordpress.com.
You can also find us at Nowhere23 on Twitter or search for Hallow-Holics, and
you can email us at Hallow-Holics@outlook.com.
You can also find us on Podpedia. Go to the HHA portal or something to that effect. They make me say that.
Oh, every time.
Yeah, I know. I'm terrible. Thank you guys for listening.
As always, thank you very much.